The pledge. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. I just like to introduce Bob Donahue for the first time as the newest member of the committee from finance, representing finance, is taking Jude's spot. So Bob and I had a chance to be together by phone last week and kind of give him a background briefing of what we've been up to, although it's woefully inadequate for giving us to speak. So I'm sure after tonight, you probably want to sit down with several of us again. So I want to introduce Bob to everybody. I think you've met everybody
Yes.
already. So
Yes.
thank you.
Nice to be here.
I'd like a motion to open the agenda for one modification if we can.
So moved.
Second? Second. Okay, so I'm going to delete number 12, the executive session from tonight's meeting. And everything we're going to talk about a number of things that are very highly preliminary reports today, and we'll just talk about those items that I thought probably should go in executive session. We're just going to talk about them as for each item and present it that way. I want to emphasize that everything we're talking about tonight, none of it has been approved by anyone. It is highly preliminary and the basis of the feasibility studies that we've hired consultants to do. So it's important to get the reactions of the committee to these feasibility studies because we've broken everybody down into 3 separate subgroups or more subgroups, and not everybody's been seeing each other's work. So my hope is that today we're going to be able to commingle everybody's perspective to understand what's going on. I will be presenting a lot of this information right up here on the screen.
You want to take a vote on that motion?
So that's the description about why. So all in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? No. Thank you. Minutes from January 15th. Does everybody have a copy? I distributed the minutes. Can I get a motion to approve the minutes? So there's a second. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor? Aye. Thank you. Item number 5 is we have invoices that have come in from zoning as well as TPA. And Tenosi invoice is for $5,065 of their total contract. They've already billed us $30,100, so this would bring the total billing up to $8,175. Their total contract is 35. Was it? Is that the right number? 0.47.
I think 37,500.
37,500 was the contract. Well within the total scope of that. In addition, we have another invoice for $13,000 from TPA Design Group, and they're the ones doing the land use study, and that's a $5,000 total contract. And this is their first invoice that they exposed. And from my perspective, they're billing us. Their work far exceeded anything that they billed us for at this stage by far. By technical. So unless there, so can I get a motion to submit?
Will to approve both.
Okay. Second. Okay. Any discussion? Okay. All in favor? Thank you.
Are you, David, just working with finance to make sure we've got on the total budget and everything for these?
Yeah, I'm keeping track of the
Yeah,
total budget
okay.
and stuff, and I'm working with Peter on it, but I can work.
I mean, well,
I'm
you're submitting them.
Yep, we're.
Everything's
I got
going.
that. Yeah. It's the, make a correction, Antonelli's contract is 67,000.
TPA is 67.
No, TBA is 65,000, Antonelli's 67,500. Where we're
Sorry.
going for the 30,000 is where they broke it up.
Oh, right. Sorry.
So Memorial Town Hall is
Memorial Town
31,600.
Hall, and I was thinking
It's
just
35
one.
8. Yeah, 35
Jeffrey at Memorial Town
Yep.
Hall.
Yes.
Okay. So old business, well, I'll give an update on Memorial Town Hall. At this stage, Memorial Town Hall is at, Antonosi has gone through the four feasibility issues on structural, statutory, I think that to restore the Memorial Hall to its original structure as a multi-purpose facility. The current design here with you here. uh, Uh, I'll bring up another file. Sorry. This is the layout that they're working on for Memorial Town Hall. And you can see that what it is, this is a high level. We've removed the multiple floors that were in the that are there. We've left the ground level floor as is, and that'll be opened up as for support space or potentially some sort of cafe or some sort of other kind of space. The seating on the main level here is proposed to be removable. So that what would happen is these seats will end up rolling back in underneath the balcony to provide like a ballroom. So one level flooring so that you could use it for a ballroom event, use it for some sort of corporate event, you know, a fair kind of thing. Maybe it's a school fair for the high school, for a college fair. Could be like some of the things like the Super Bowl that the Chamber did last weekend, for example. The Chamber does a number of things where they could do events for the indoor flea market, but that was done a couple weekends ago. They have another thing. The stage area would be here. It's about 20 foot wide is the opening here. And then these would be fixed. The balcony would be fixed. The elevator remains in place. Those areas here, they come transitional and as well as service bathrooms and things of that nature. We would attach the powder house to the building, and that would provide ancillary space to Memorial Town Hall. One of the questions is whether or not save it or save the powder house and put an addition on the building or put a connection in and do that we're looking at. So at this stage, we're in the middle of an estimate on the costs. They've done a preliminary, they have a cost estimator. It's a company called PACS. And I'm not sure what that stands for. If Nick does, Nick. many times over. They are in, right now, we are in the range of somewhere between $900 and $1,200 a square foot to do everything, including the fit out and all the things, order of magnitude. It's somewhere north of $7 million, $7-8 million, maybe as high as 9.5. So that's the order of magnitude in where we're at. These are very preliminary. Nick is helping review that, those budget that based on his expertise. And he's in the business, so we're evaluating that. But it looks like a reasonably sound budget. This, estimate at this stage is a very preliminary.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, there's a lower floor.
I'm just wondering, there's a base, like,
Well, it's a main level floor, so yeah, so if you go, if I look at this level.
I think of it as a basement because there's steps that go up to the front entrance. Okay.
So here you can see, this is the lower level. There's a lower level right here. You go into the lower level through the stairs on the west side of the building. And then in this area back here is the archives. This is a conference room in that area. And then there's some offices over here that have been fit out. This was a drawing that was done back in 1994, 2004, something like that. This is the main floor. And then above the main floor, this is where the probate. So this is, you walk in here. This is the probate clerk's office. This is the probate courtroom. Probate's office, the probate judge's office is here. This is a room that's used by Youth and Family Services. This is a room that's used by Youth and Family Services, and down here, these rooms are used by Family Services. So, and then this back in this area here is used by the archive right now. And then this is that big open meeting room on the third floor.
Yes.
So basically what we're doing is removing this floor, meeting floor, and also removing all the walls and partitions and things of that nature. Basically, it was a steel structure built within the existing open space. So basically, we're just deconstructing the floors that were built there, and then fitting out with the lighting and updated HVAC, mechanicals, soundproofing, all the kind of things that you do for making it performance / multi-use functions. So that's where we're at the point of that. This is the refining this budget a little bit further, and then and obviously we're looking at other spaces about where they might go, another location. Are there any questions or comments?
I mean, I think this is just a concept, right, of how this will all be developed and turned into purpose back to its original purpose.
So the point of the effort was a feasibility study on
Yeah.
whether it was feasible to restore the building to its original
Right.
function. So from a construction standpoint, that seems to be feasible now. And from a financial standpoint, it seems to be feasible. Now, that's ultimately, but it's certainly of the point, at least in my opinion, and I think in the subcommittee's opinion, that it's worthwhile discussing and looking at as a serious option go forward to provide some of these functions that have been articulated and desired in the town, but have not been met in recent years.
And also, I would just point out, I'm sorry. I would just point out for people watching that the concept, if this were to go forward, and again, it's very preliminary in concept right now, But, Madison Youth Community Services and the probate court and Everett's, archives would find a new home. It's not like they would just disappear. We would find another, an alternate location.
So right now, the chapel is where the Youth and Family Services is. And we've met with, and we'll go into that as we talk about Jeffrey next, but it's important, it's a good transition. Youth and Family Services is busting at the seams and their space is really quite poor. For the amount of people that they serve in this community, I think that it's something that really should be addressed. So Youth and Family Services has between the chapel as well as Memorial Town Hall, 38 to 4,000 square feet. So it's about where they are at in terms of the numbers. The probate court, I went in and did a rough count. They're about just under 1,400 to 1,500 square feet. Relatively small amount of square footage, as well as the archives is about a little bit more. So we have about 2,800 square feet in the chapel on the main floor that could be repurposed, because Youth and Family Services, we're going to be showing you, is we can potentially move to Jeffrey. If that's the case, the thought is that the archives, the welcome center, and chamber fit in chapel, and you still have a presence on the green. Still have, it could be fitted out, be more of a museum, as well as a historical kind of context of what would happen at the town, for visitors and new folks. And then right now, potentially if Board of Ed moves out of this space in the town campus, there'd be space at the town campus for probate court. Probate court's kind of funky in that it's kind of laid out and spread out. And you're not delighted by their space. It's interesting, the concept that nobody's really delighted by their space. So there's certainly limitations that everybody's having. So we'll be moving into that conversation. Okay. Any other comments or questions on Memorial Hall? Jeffrey, you had a question? No.
You took care of it for me.
Sorry.
No, that's fine.
Right. Let's move on to talk about Jeffrey. I brought the drawings. You want to explain?
Yeah.
Nick and Megan have been leading up the effort on Jeffrey.
So there's a second.
Yes. So that's the kind of total, and then this is the existing space. So, like, I think it's probably usable.
I think everybody's familiar with the location of the building, the general orientation of it. Stops road right there. The yellow would be primarily Board of Ed. Pink would be purple family, as mentioned, 45,000 square foot building, give or take. It's about 35,000 feet for Board of Ed, and about 10,000 for Youth and Family. Anthony, communicating with both entities to try and right size and estimate to make sure that those made sense, and feel pretty confident that they're on track there. You go to the next page. Well, actually, go point off the temporaries. Yep, yes. That one did. The temporaries are just to the right.
Black roof with the little white squares on it.
This area right here is temporary.
So those have been around, I think, at least 20 years, right, Peter? About 5 to 10 more than most people get out of portables. Yep. They look pretty good, but they're in rough shape. Floor, temporary plywood, the floor for infills where poles get felt with the floor after the vacant. So there's really no point to it. So That, by getting rid of that, it's a step 45,000 square feet. Antonazzi had in some of their scoping documents, some site work to work outside the building, reclaiming and repaving some of those paved areas, and as well as extensive site lighting. We kind of talked about big picture cost wise. I don't know whether those are really necessary. We're not changing the layout of the building. We're not changing the entrance to the property. We've got parking, we've got drainage, we've got some degree of site lighting. So I don't see that as something that's nice to have, but in the grand scheme of things, it's really the building and getting the family and board of ed in right. So go to the next page, please.
Sorry, what about septic there? Has there been any kind of testing on the
No,
system?
no testing on the septic
Okay. Where's the leaching field?
in the back.
Yeah.
This area.
okay.
No, it's over the.
Over
here, yeah.
Okay.
I just note that the proposal is, because this is gonna be more academic space in here, that there be a connection to Daniel and as well connection to Paulson. I'm sorry, this is new. The Paulson has been corrected. I had a real old slide that they misspelled Paulson. But there'll be some sort of a walkway connection, probably a covered walkway kind of connection that will go to both of those.
And just to clarify, so the Antonazzi's scheme here, those were just asphalt walks. Okay. That coverage in this. So looking at the building, it's a little wonky to, change the orientation of what you were just looking at on plan, right? So main entrance to the building. So that loop is in here. Yeah. And the play field out back there, just kind of reorient. Yellow is Board of Ed space. Yes, yeah, central office space. You see, it's largely cut up of small offices. The existing cafeteria acts as a conference room as well. And then everything. Well, I should have started a little bit higher level. So there's a dashed line vertical on the page. See where it says North Wing, Madison Youth and Family Services. Everything to the right of that line or north of that line is youth and family, everything south is it's a combination. So yellow, as mentioned, it's central office space. The orange is athletics, as noted. And then the purple and light purple were programmed for middle school and high school classrooms, specialty rooms, that sort of thing. For anyone that's been in there the last few years and recalls, the bathrooms in there are very small, very tight. Toilets are very low to the floor, as are the sinks, taken to school forever. So in each of the gray areas, see those are bathrooms. There's some work in every one of those toilet rooms to get them up to code and get them to the point where fitting with adult use. Down below, where the cafeteria is, at the bottom of the screen, there's two gray area there. That would take the existing men's and women's, combine them into one large women's, and then add a men's restroom. Probably the most invasive work that is in the scheme from Antonazzi from a construction standpoint. And then on the very bottom, purple is the culinary arts and dining area. So the part of the scheme or part of the program is to repurpose the existing kitchen, some sort of culinary arts fashion for education. Any questions?
Just a couple quick comments. One is that we've worked hard to create a separate entrance for youth and family services, which is right here, independent, and then be secluded, sequestered from the rest of the building. So they'd have their own space with their own ownership there. This is roughly 9,700 square feet. Like I said before, they're under 5,000 today. The program and academy was about 7,500, but that was a compromise on a bunch of fronts. So this is a program that is adequate plus room for expansion. there. The Board of Ed would enter here, so they'd have their own separate entrance here. And that would, so that would open up in this area here. And then this would be the third entrance that would be for the academic function. So that we would isolate all three functions from those areas. We repurposed or kept the existing gymnasium for small athletic functions like fencing, volleyball, smaller sports that don't have a real home right now and that are really problem, but we'll also have the library could be repurposed as well. So we can open up both those spaces that way. One of the thinking here is because of its proximity to our farm, might be able to do something culinary arts farm to table. That would be to try to connect to our farm and try to integrate functions in the area in a more elegant fashion. By keeping some sort of classroom functions in here, we preclude a change of use of the space, which will save us on the campus. So.
Can I ask, the projections now, I know they haven't really priced it out fully, but I would highly recommend that whatever they come up with for initial pricing, that they scope in, like modern air conditioning, because that building.
Yeah, that's in there now.
Closed for students.
Yeah.
Yeah, so,
It's a total redo of AC and
okay,
HVAC is completely redone. The mechanicals are redone.
Part of the interior programming that we just talked about, there's a handful of walls existing walls that are scheduled to come out, not very many at all. It's largely interior drywall partitions that are getting added, chopping up those classrooms. From a building envelope standpoint, a new roof is absolutely necessary. It's making the latest locations currently. So
I just wanted to share with you, this is the existing drawing of the space. Yeah.
part of the conceptual design is to replace all the exterior glazing. So really, there's two generations of glazing in there. There's looks like original, which is so it's quite old construction that it's used at that time. That practice for some decades, and then there is some newer glazing back the building. So that should stay.
As we get, we're trying to come up with just kind of range of costs, right? Order of magnitude. I would think there needs to be the infrastructure piece, right? Or we're gonna get kind of separated out. And then there's like the build out that this is just one idea, right? This hasn't even gone through your board or, you know, really it's concepts, meeting needs, right, through discussion. So, you know, we want to get too committed to a layout per se, you know, as much as more, this is kind of base renovation and here's like, if we fit it out for this, it's this level of cost. Some are gonna be more costly than others. Just in terms of how we start looking at some of the cost data on.
And as David mentioned, new HVAC throughout and
Yeah.
requires new electrical service as well. HVAC
Okay.
consultant system. So
We have, with Antonosi and I have met with, Youth and Family Services and their team. And so that is more refined.
Well,
we
plus
need
the
to have a-
exercise academy, we went through
Right.
a lot of thinking about space needs,
Exactly.
so, yeah.
So we took the kind of academy design, applied it here, went over it with them, and they said what they didn't like about that now, revised it that way. This is basically Antonosi's view of fitting existing spaces of the Board of Ed in here with about 4 or 5 additional spaces that Dr. Cook told us they probably need down the road. So that's how this all came about. These pink areas here are just not even programmed. So
Yeah.
really, we got several here. Order of magnitude on this, we're talking somewhere between 18 and $21 million probably. That kind of range at this preliminary stage, depending on a lot of issues. So, but just so you get an order of a sense of where this is at.
Which most of that is those core infrastructure things, right? In terms of the,
It's the roof, it's the electrical infrastructure, it's the HVAC. I mean, and from a, the reason it's so, on a cost per square foot basis, we're talking $450 to $600 a square foot on the range. Because of the size of the building, the numbers add up. So that, conversely to the Memorial Hall is $900 a square foot kind of deal. So that just to give you, this is mostly a maintenance and repair job with some mechanical upgrades and then some interior modifications.
and new construction. Would be how many?
New construction would be 1,500.
Well,
Yeah, no, I think new construction probably.
yeah, okay.
More.
So it just gives you an idea of, and I think these are always, these numbers are so shocking to people and they kind of went through the academy process, but it is where the construction market is, right? It's just, we're seeing it repeating over and over again with any kind of project. It costs a lot, even if you're renovating.
So, go ahead. I was going to say, so in terms of estimating, it's typically done at 3 stages in the design phase. First being schematic, design development, or the bid documents, final estimates done. Prior to schematic, you have conceptual. This is, in my mind, pre-conceptual. So yeah, at this stage, estimate this. The numbers, if you had two separate estimators do an estimate of based on these limited documents, numbers could be 80% to 100% off because so many assumptions are being made. Antonazzi provided 3 or 4 page scoping document laying out to PAX, the estimator, of what was in the job, what wasn't. But there's still a lot of interpretation and assumptions that have to be made. So the next step is for me to review with Antonazzi and PAX to say, okay, does this really want to be a part of the job? If it's something that perhaps the committee would like to look at and say, yeah, maybe we cut that out, sort of put into bigger buckets some scope items, larger scope. We're nowhere near a point where we'd say, oh, well, the estimator assumed the higher end flooring material. What if we went to a lower end flooring material? We're not at that stage. That would come at schematic and design development. At this point, it's does the number fit the appetite? If it doesn't, then you look at program. You got 4 programs in here. It's in culinary, board of ed, there's additional teaching spaces, and then meal and family. Couple of those out. What will be the savings for that? And then from there, it's as I mentioned, some of the larger scope items, not doing any cycling.
Or how could you phase? I mean, a lot of this could be phased. I mean, the culinary and a lot of the academic things could be phased down the road, for example.
Well,
Second.
so I would say though, before we go deeper into this, and I know you're trying to get a lot of questions answered and stuff, there's a lot of. I think part of this is really understanding a big chunk of this is Port Vet, right? And then also Port Slackman too, right? These are discussions with Dr. Cook. What process do you think is, should this go to the Board of Ed next to have a conversation about, do we even want to explore this, from a planning, because this is kind of new, right? It wasn't like a year ago, you're saying we're bursting at the seams, right? This is kind of an idea that generated that we have the space now to use, right? Which is a fantastic idea if it's the location, but,
Just as a byproduct, we have had conversation with Dr. Cook on this, and I've reached out to him, and he's arranging for kind of a subcommittee of the administrators to look at and give us some feedback on all this and whether or not this makes sense, how it works. So that's coming up in the next couple.
yeah, okay, so I think then flagging this as a high level idea of how to use space, right? Versus the next level down is really getting into
The level of design that happened with Dr. Cook was basically he wanted to be able to isolate the conference and public kind of meeting space from the offices and there. And he also wanted to be able to bring in the technology in this space here. Outside of that, everything else here about the layouts and the size of the offices were all based on existing kind of structures. So they haven't even seen that level.
Yeah, and I do want to make clear that Dr. Cook has been asked, like, if the central offices were moved here, what would you need? This has not yet come to, he's trying to be, amenable because, the part be it from the Board of Ed or the central offices, the administration of the district, to be the tail that wags the dog. But at the same time, this is not a tacit agreement to anything yet at this point. It's just, hey, let's come to you, superintendent. If this were to happen, what would you need and how would it be best arranged? And that's the stage that we're at now. It would take some more process among the administration first to determine, like, did he get everything, or the things he didn't think of, other things they may want, and then for it to go to the board, I would imagine it would have to go to
I
the
think
board.
that's the next proper step is the Board of Ed administrative function, folks like we've done with Youth and Family Services. Youth and Family Services is far more thoughtful. It's not final. I'd say, we're probably in that 60 to 65% range there. And for the Board of Ed kind of spaces and the academic spaces, we're probably in the 25% range to 30% range of certainty.
For sure. And the other thing is, I think it's worth pointing out, because I know that folks in the community have asked this question. If Jeffrey wasn't good enough for our students, why is it good enough to keep brains? And I think Jeffrey is younger than some other buildings in town. It has good bones, it has good structure. And one of the main issues that we had at Jeffrey for students was the lack of HVAC, other than in the portable classrooms. And so, I would want to make sure there's no asbestos or hazmats, as Antonozzi already considered that, and they taken any samples from the walls or
It's a
anything.
great point. That's one of the things I wanted to bring up is before this topic ends, is that regardless of what happens with this building, whether it gets demolished in its entirety, whether it is used similarly to what's shown, or it's a completely different scheme and program, it needs to be tested by a licensed hygienist, because, Peter gave me these documents that spell out some of the hazmats that are in there, but they don't go, it's only what you can see, what is in these documents. It doesn't, so if we were to do this work, there are numerous materials that would be impacted that aren't in this report. And that cost, as you know, abatement cost could be upwards of $1 million, and significantly skew the cost and potentially the decision process. So I think because it needs to happen regardless, unless that building just sits there for 30 years, you would need to test it now. But I think that seems unlikely. I think it makes sense for the town to forward to getting it tested now anyway, and provide some more information.
And is that, I'm trying to think of what we went through with Ryerson. I don't know if you would be able to know what because they did other level testing
Yes.
for demolition.
That's exactly what you'd have to do.
So that cost us,
That's like $8,000.
yeah, so there's like levels of this, right, that we could say, okay, now we gotta make because that'll have a big impact, right, on decision, costs, everything. So maybe that is something that we consider taking forward sooner rather than later to get funding to do some of those testing, things that will help to make decisions.
We do have an on-call hygienist.
Yeah,
So Langdon, who does our monitoring as well.
yeah. Yeah, I'm just trying to think fund wise. I don't know if did we use a buffer for here for?
Yes,
funding?
we have
did.
Yeah.
$25,000.
Okay, so it might be that we use some of that. Yeah.
Other
Okay.
uses.
That would include a hazardous building materials assessment, like for lead, asbestos, PCBs,
Yeah,
all of that
It
stuff.
would certainly include PCBs if you wanted to. Some municipalities.
You don't
choose
have
not
to, though, do you?
You don't have to. Just means that material needs to be taken out as if it were an ACM or asbestos containing material. Lead should be part of it. Lead typically isn't tested. It's really more advanced because it's for all intents and purposes not regulated anywhere near the level that ACM and PCBs are. But a lot of the work that has to happen in this building will involve connected to existing steel, which is that would
I just had one other question, kind of on uses. I recall, correct me if I'm wrong, that as part of the commercial kitchen, that might be something that could be made available, or would the intent be to make it available to the community so that individuals, my experience, commercial kitchens are always in demand by entrepreneurs who want to make fudge or jellies or salsas or whatever. I'm just wondering if and that might be a source of revenue doing it that way too, but had that been a consideration to make it available to more than just kind of culinary classes or town-related activities? Could it have a broader scope, or is that beyond the scope of where we are right now to consider?
It's probably beyond the scope of where we are, but I don't see why that could be part.
I mean, I
that
think
could
that's
be-
part of the longer term discussion about, the use of the space and programming and all that, but, there would need to then be a discussion about the investment, right? To have a commercial kitchen, that's gonna be, required. Yeah, and we saw that through the academy classes too, that was kind of you're tight on a budget, that's usually the first thing that's gonna get knocked out, but I think if you can show that there's a return on that, through community. I mean, I just wonder, like, if there's, because there's so many, and I'm not trying to, this is, I think, great that, there's so many things impacting what goes in here, right? Decision points. So this is like one scenario, right? So then there's the, what if probate were to go there? What if, there's like all, and I'm not suggesting that, but I'm just saying there's all these different scenarios. And I think, is there a way to rate? Like, I'm trying to remember if we kind of did this before.
We did.
Yeah, we did go through and rate it, right? Like, what's the best fit for the different buildings? Okay, because I think it's just important to come back to this, because I'm sure we'll get a lot of people saying, well, like, why did you pick, why does Board of Ed get dibs on the building? Like, do they really need it? They're, because it's gonna cost money to move it from here and, so,
So we did we did this table, that was where we accumulated all the various programming needs. And we kind of laid them out as immediate, midterm, long-term kind of needs. So immediate was like 18 to 24 months kind of time
Right.
horizon. Within 3 to 5 years, is near term, and then beyond 5 to 20 years, I think, long term. So, basically,
Yeah.
the key functions would be youth and family services, some of the athletic problems at the schools, Olson Auditorium, some of the sports spaces. So those are youth and family services is really probably the most urgent immediate need that we have.
and some of the stuff identified for the school district.
It's already underway.
Uh,
It's already underway, like the Polson
That's
upgrade,
yeah,
that's already underway.
right. But I'm just thinking about the athletic space and stuff. It's more about needing it at that campus, right? The location is, right? So yes, Neck River's open. Is there an opportunity to use that? But, there will be a sidewalk thing, but I think the location is,
Location of Jeffrey is
Yeah.
very desirable, given.
Yeah, one thing we probably also should talk about is when you look at this grid in particular, and we talk about doing these projects in phases. This committee was conceived specifically because there was concern in the town that there was a feeling that projects would get done on a one-off basis, and then it's willy-nilly spending, and when we have a need, we build a building, or we, refurbish a building, and then we, find more needs later. And so the whole concept for the ad hoc town facilities committee was to do long-range planning. To try to take all the puzzle pieces and fit them together in ways that are most efficient and would facilitate efficiency for the town. So we're not chasing our tails and spending unnecessary money on expensive capital projects. So even though it may appear that this calls for a load of money, it really, if you plan these things out right, it could save us money over time. First of all. Secondly, we're talking 25 year horizon on some of this stuff. And third, you're going to be spending money on facilities and capital projects in a town as a municipality anyway. You can't ignore the fact that there's going to be expense and expenditure. So this is an effort to get our arms around it, to do it the most efficient way, maybe save money, but at least do it smartly. I think that needs to be repeated over and over. This isn't just a pie in the sky. Oh, we want this. Oh, we want that. That's not what this is about.
I call it twofers. So you have like Memorial Town Hall as well as Jeffrey. There's a whole bunch of maintenance and upgrade issues that are required in those buildings. If you do it in coordination with the renovation, you get some economies of scale by having all these functions happening at the same time, which is going to save you money. There may be much as, in my experience, has been much as 15 to 30%. You save rather than by doing all these projects independently, because you're eliminating each individual overhead and each individual contractor markups and all those other kind of things by coordinating these things. So that's a big piece of this, is how do you coordinate and I call it getting twofers out of every job that you can.
The other question I'd ask, again, it's really premature, I think, but as we talk about numbers, is there consideration given to seeing how we can leverage municipal money by with either private sector money, foundations, other sources, naming rights for the culinary section or whatever, call it the whatever. But it just seems the Jacques Pepin. But my point is, I think there's some opportunities. I think both state funding, federal funding, even though federal is so questionable at the moment, private foundations, and a number of them are focused on different kinds of activities. But I think to really have an exhaustive look at what's out there in the way of alternative funding, which can be, and many of those do look for the matching kinds of things. So if the municipality is ready to match, maybe there's an opportunity to get a 3-fer out of a 2-fer by doing that.
Right. And
I don't know who would be responsible maybe for researching. I mean, does the town have a grants person per se?
We do, and then we're an administrator person, to help administer grants. I think once we have a defined plan and design and concept for a building, I think then we talk about, well, what are the opportunities to pay for it? And I think there'll be different grant opportunities. We also have some existing grants that we have to decide about repurposing potentially. There's going to be a lot of discussion about that. So yeah, I would agree. And then also the public-private partnership concept, I don't know, this would be the best, example of it, because it's heavily dependent on, educational or, like municipal or governmental use, but it's worth the conversation.
Or maybe Memorial Town Hall for
right.
partnering with some performing arts organization,
Right.
for example.
Yeah, so I think that's where if we have the kind of concept, then we start thinking creatively about how do we move forward and fund them.
There's also a possibility that the state Office of Grants Administration would fund some of the Board of Ed central office.
Yeah, and then
And also especially the educational spaces, if that's part of the project.
So part of my objective of tonight by going through this is to get consensus of the committee that are we going in the right direction and should we continue to move forward on in particular the Memorial Town Hall and the Jeff endeavors by trying to fill them out a little bit in greater detail, as well as getting a little bit more refinement on the cost side.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, yes.
I mean, I think we're aligned with what the mission was, right? And so to the process, it's still part of that budget, right? And there's scope of services with Antonazi.
I was going to say, still within the
It's
scope.
all within the scope of services.
Yes, so far, yes. We are, one of the things I do want to bring up, given if this moves forward, you need to then start thinking about the chapel. As, how could that be potentially reprogrammed as well as the current existing space here at the town campus? So I'd like to start a further negotiation with Antonazzi as a change order for them to, well, what would it entail for them to start looking at those two, at these components to start the chapel and which other? The town campus. Because part of that would be getting feedback from town administration about what spaces are short, and what are the needs for expansion of existing spaces, and so we need a kind of an inventory and then layout of the space, how it's and what it's best used for. So I'd like to just let you know, I'd like that, since we're moving forward on that, I think that's the next logical step, and we do have money left over in our approval cover a change order on the health office.
Well, I think I guess the question is, the key component of this is that the Board of Ed is gonna be most of Jeffrey, right? So that means we can't use it so it's that.
If that's a non-starter, then we're
Yeah,
spending money
yeah.
for,
Exactly. So I just wonder if maybe have that conversation. I just don't wanna, if we get some resistance to the Board of Ed not wanting to take this up and pursue it further. We don't wanna be looking, because then we've got Jeffrey,
Okay, that
right?
makes sense.
Yeah,
Yeah, so we'll have the Board of Ed conversation and then
yeah.
go forward.
I mean, I think we could all say we could endorse it if the Board of Ed is supportive of us moving forward in this process of looking at the Jeffrey space, then we
Yeah.
should look at, because that's that displacement, right? So,
Yeah.
because the Board of Ed says no on Jeffrey, then then it becomes, okay, well, you still got probate, you still got Charlotte Everts, you've got those groups, so then the next logical discussion is for them to go into the town. It's Jeffrey, right?
Right.
I think from a Board of Ed perspective, maybe sometime in the next meeting or two, we have meetings every other week. Although we only had one meeting in February, so our next meeting is March. I would say, would it be okay by the end of March if we were to
Well, I mean, I just found out-
conceptually, like,
Yeah.
it would have to be a discussion and a
Yeah.
vote to conceptually, just oppose
Right.
or favor.
Continue to investigate.
Looking to-
I just say continue to investigate.
Exactly. Yeah, it's not a commitment to.
And the only reason I'm just, that is kind of the linchpin thing, right?
Yep, yep.
And, so. How long is there looking at this, David? Do we have an idea of, you're gonna get an estimate from them of what it's gonna cost, or?
But mostly the chapel is what I wanted to look at
Yeah.
first as a
Yeah.
first step, because, based on this discussion, because basically, how would you fit the Welcome Center, the archives, and the chamber in the chapel?
Okay.
That would be the thought of how does that fit conceptually there? And then the probate court used to be in the chapel at one point in time, so maybe that's a better use. So it'd be, is it better to do one or the other? Some of this also has wild card in terms of whatever happens to academies. So that kind of comes in as a wild card, but I think that's far more iffy or questionable at this stage. So,
Well,
so
along
I
with
think
Tom
that,
Hollis too, right? Because
Right.
that hasn't been determined that we would be renovating it or,
so it's really more
yeah.
this space, the Board of Ed space here at the town campus as well as the chapel. Those are the two key spaces, but I'll start the conversations
Yeah.
with Dr. Cook, and then if they get to kind of go ahead, that seems to make sense. he seemed very positive, and the folks he talked to, be very positive about this. But obviously, there's a process.
To his credit, he's keeping an open mind. Changes change, and they finally got this place the way they wanted it, and the air conditioning and everything. And so it is a big thought to uproot and move. On the other hand, they could gain. There's stuff to be gained from that conceptual plan as well. So yeah, it's not. Frankly, it's not only up to Dr. Cook. It's also the Board of Ed. So
And it's about a 25% expansion of space for them.
yeah, no, there's
Allow for growth
a
and
lot of positive.
Yes, yeah,
Yeah.
because right now they're about 6,800 square feet. We're talking just about 10,000
Yeah,
at Jeffrey.
Yeah.
With,
I can't on
sure.
Dr. Cook's behalf or on the board's behalf. It would have to be public process and vote. But we can get that done relatively quickly, I think, like before the March.
The next step is Ryerson. So we've taken a look at Ryerson, and the feasibility concept was to remove all the pods on the northern part of Ryerson, demo all that, and then fix this wall, which is an interior wall, and convert it to an exterior wall, that this could be repurposed. So we've looked at that. It's conceivable to be done, so that it's feasible to be done, because all the mechanicals and a lot of the other MEP issues are all kind of housed in this part of the wing. Problem is the cost is exorbitant. It's upwards of, what's the number? No, the preliminary estimates were
Yeah, that's, it was over $1,000 square foot.
yeah, 14 is $18 million. I mean, we're talking two and a half times what it costs to build a brand new classroom.
Yeah.
So, to get 7 classrooms in a common space. So at this stage, we're recommending, and I think Nick is recommending that this should be demoed. So we're at the point now where we think that Ryerson just should be demoed, and we should reserve the site for a future expansion of another town use, most likely a future school site. So we wanted to explain. I'm not sure if there's any more that we need to talk about it.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think Anthony spent more time looking at this than they probably figured on when they proposed, but they wanted to sort of run it to ground, so to speak. And this is probably the best scheme they could come up with, and cost wise, it just doesn't seem to be all that bad.
So it's kind of,
not a structure that is something we want to preserve, right? It's not like,
there's nothing architecturally significant about it or anything. But this goes by why we're doing the feasibility. Feasibility, mechanically, structurally, and financially, and programmatically. So we cut a couple of these, but it doesn't check all the boxes. Jeffrey, on the other hand, in Memorial Hall seemed to check all those boxes that say it's worthwhile.
Yeah, I think when we all voted in the referendum in February of 22 for the schools renewal project, I think a lot of people had in their mind that Ryerson would be demolished. It wasn't necessarily an official part of that budget. But I think a lot of people kind of felt that way and understood that to be the case. We owed it to the town and to ourselves as a committee to look to see if there was any salvageable use that made sense. I think probably it's kismet, and we're lucky that it turns out there probably isn't. And I think most people will be pleased in the community that this will end up being a tear down.
yeah, I think that the Board of Ed made that decision, right? We do not think this is worthy of using or modeling for a school, but that's a very different conversation. And what we were talking about was, town garage space, like looking at it very high level, right? So that's why we were exploring that. It wasn't like, oh, we're going to make it into a new school. It was like, is there some other non-educational use that the town could consider by being cost effective, repurposing part of the building?
Regional dispatch was one.
Regional dispatch center, garage space. Arts Farm we talked about, could this be salvaged in some way, to create like a theater, not theater, but like, camp kind of environment or whatever. Or what you're saying. And we know that it's gonna be like 3.5 million to tear down, or no, two,
Less than that.
was it?
Yeah,
That's probably not too.
270, yeah.
Okay.
So David, one of the things we've talked about is in our flow processes, if there's an asset that we really don't need and it's infeasible to be reused for town purposes, does it make sense? I asked naively, does it make sense then to see if anyone else might be interested in it? Does it make sense to avoid a 2.5 million or whatever cost to demo by putting an RFP out and seeing what kind of interests we get from private developers who might see something that we don't?
Our sense is that because of its adjacency, that early on in our committee, we made a strong point that properties that had strong adjacencies should be retained. Because for potential future, so for example, properties adjacent to Jeffrey should be retained. Jeffrey should be retained because of its adjacencies to Bolson and Hand. Because of its adjacency to Brown and the way it's structured an entrance, we think Ryerson should be retained. And the forecasts potentially early on saying in the late 2030s to early 2040s, we may need to thinking of another K4, K5 school.
And in addition to that, the state is considering and moving, in fact, toward universal pre-K.
Right.
So between that and an expansion in terms of population,
And the cost of acquisitioning land is pretty high. So if you have land, that's an incredibly valuable asset. So I think it makes a lot of sense to keep this property in particular for future town use.
I'm just wondering if it might be, worth the committee doing a formal recommendation for demolition, citing strategic value of the land. Just wait, so then the board could start that process, because we're also wrapping up Neck River. And some of the money that is allocated to this demolition is in the Neck River budget, so there has to be some decisions made about that. There's gonna be more money needed. But at least it helps us from a planning standpoint, say, okay, we know we've got $1.5 million, I think, that had been set aside in the Ryerson, the Neck River budget for demolition. And it helps us plan then, and maybe just, I think the public wants to see action too,
I'll move that we vote tonight to recommend demolition of Ryerson.
I'll second that.
Further discussion, I think we could caveat that we talked about all these things, But,
Yes, for further discussion on my part, again, maybe I'm certainly the contrarian point of view here. It just seems to me you could isolate this building and reuse it for something, whatever the purpose someone might have, while still preserving the ball fields and the other things to provide for that additional acreage that might someday be needed adjacent to Brown.
You should know that the purple area is pretty well destroyed at this stage because it was used for SWAT teams and they blew out the doors and they did a whole bunch of. So that part of the area is partially demoed already.
Well, besides that, there's a couple other considerations. There's been mold in that building in the past, and there's asbestos, I believe, has been found to be there. So whoever would buy this from the town to do something with it would have to remediate it substantially. And then the other thing is you would want to control the use to make sure that it's a use case that's compatible with education.
Mhm.
You wouldn't want to build a bar there.
Yeah.
Where you might need
And
an
you would make some
elementary school
restrictions
nearby.
into accomplish that for sure.
Yeah.
Or, the other option would be if the town wished to lease it out to another function, but then the town would be responsible for upgrading all those functions still. So the costs are pretty substantial.
Although some of the costs, like we were saying, Seth, for remediation or whatever, that as with Academy, that's going to be the responsibility of whoever develops it. So those responsibilities really aren't on us as much as on whoever would buy it. So I mean, even if you sold it for a nominal amount, if you avoided an expensive 2.5 million and write some deed restriction in and also pretty well define the acreage that goes with it, leaving the rest for future use for the town or for educational purposes. I just think there's maybe another way to look at it, or at least, I guess my feeling is exhaust the options before we vote to demolish.
Didn't we
We
already?
needed, also, I'm sorry, that road is not a town road. That's a school road. The town does not have any maintenance over that at all. So it's just something that, they don't plow it or anything.
Yeah.
We have to pay for that. So I mean, that's a whole other thing to think about, like, go for sale.
I'm of the opinion, and I appreciate your perspective, but given this proximity of and adjacencies, that I think it would be a mistake for the town to let this property go under any scenario. If you could lease it potentially out for a function, but as long as the town could bring it back, do something with it at any point in time at its option. I mean, that would be the only way I would think that would make a lot of sense. Because I mean, if you think about where you want to build another school down the road or another major building, this is a prime site. It's great, good geographic location given the town. It's on the road. It's on 79, so it's on a main artery. It's got all the good things going for it in terms of a site that you want to acquire.
Also has acreage attached to it.
It's got acreage attached to it, sure.
So
So
miles south of 80,
yeah, so
it's central.
yeah. So I mean, I would think that it would be to acquire a property of this much acreage would be, significant amount of money.
Although you redraw it, so you're not giving up as much of the acreage, you're retaining a lot of it and maybe reducing the amount that would go with the building.
The problem there is, if you look at the ball fields, like you're saying, like if you were to salvage the playground area and the ball fields there, it's not big enough to contain a building and appropriate parking for staff for an elementary school. So you really, even if you level Ryerson and were to build a new school, like up in that square where the softball fields are now, you would still need all that extra area for parking, in my opinion. I mean,
It's parking.
I also think that, academy is part of the purpose of the academy, which is a historic structure, right?
There's not.
So preservation was part of the motivation with the EOI, and then also the location for economic development, I feel this structure, from what we've heard from the school when they went through the, process, and then I'm deciding to demolish it, right? As well as just from the experts that went through it recently, there just didn't seem to be any kind of, this like rehab. I think there's nothing to save, you know what I mean? Like structurally, it doesn't sound like it's that sound, and
To renovate this building, there's an inherent premium beyond the abatement. It's the layout. The column grid lines are very, very challenging to work around. And then in addition to that, there's so many different levels of that one-story building. There's concrete ramps throughout, and that creates a lot of challenges with ADA requirements and things like that. So that was one thing that Antonazzi brought up. Yeah, I know that was something that was brought up back when the schools were going, was deciding, is this building play? And we've all come to the same conclusion they did.
not to mention that, trying to put, new HVAC system in there was going to be problematic. When
Yes.
structurally how it's set up, so that was. I feel like there's been enough research and data, and it seems like 90% of the people we talk to think it should be torn down anyway. So I get the heart is to repurpose, right, and to the waste. Yeah.
Example, years ago, it's just geographically it wasn't suited for them, but we toured this building, a school for autistic children. And actually, the way it laid out with the pods in the center, four in each area surrounded by the pods, it was perfect. They told me perfect to manage children with autism as far as educating them. But again, it's finding that one off. In this case, it was the right building in the wrong place. story of real estate. But location's everything, but there may very well be a use for it. I just feel reluctant to see something demolished and also avoid the cost of demolition. That's all.
Do you want to make the motion, Seth, or do you want to table this, or?
I thought I already made the
You
motion.
made a motion.
Second.
All right, I'll second your motion. So we have a motion and a second that as a committee, we're moving forward to recommend demolition of Ryerson.
Yeah.
So is any other discussion? All in favor? Aye.
One dissenting vote.
So,
Yeah, there's one.
All right.
We'll be able to handle two POIs.
I'm ready, come on.
All right, the next item on the agenda is the work that TPA has been doing. And so I'm going to, one of these. So TPA has been looking at a number of developments. Basically, we had 16 parcels total that we were looking at, about 150 acres of land in total that we looked at. Of those, there were 7 parcels that were adjacent to one another. So they've combined those parcels to treat them as one. So basically, we've looked at 8 parcels. Of those 8 parcels, 2 were deemed non-developable. All right, totally. So we looked at a parcel on Country Road that the Affordable Housing Committee asked us to look at. It could be conceived as a potential site for affordable housing. County Road, that's very far up north. The answer was no on that. We also looked at 5-6 acres that we have that's north of the existing train station that we own, the town owns, but because of the wetlands and where the over-under is going, that was deemed as not developable. We also looked at 2 other properties that were the DPW site and the bus garage site on Nathan's Lane. So DPW site on Fort Path and Nathan's Lane. After reviewing both the drawings, plans, as well as potential options, we feel that both those sites make sense to be retained in their current functions. So the DPW garage under the program of expansion should continue to move forward at the Fort Path. There's a premium to that construction because of the site work. But the reality is if we move the DPW somewhere else, there'd be a premium for all the underground tanks and all the infrastructure requirements that you'd have to put in for there. And it's basically the equivalent amount of money. So it's, one way or another, it's going to be the same amount of money, and is it worth the disruption to change the location and all that? So fundamentally,
the building they have functions. They just
Yeah.
need more space.
they need additional buildings.
Throw that building out like it.
Exactly. And they're retaining all the fuel tanks and garage spaces and the lifts and all those kinds of things. So that's going to stay. We have found space at the Nathan's Lane where they believe they can expand the parking so that all the buses can be stationed there. And there is space also if there's a desire to expand the building a little bit for more breakout rooms and space for the drivers. So we do have space to accomplish that at Nathan's Lane, and it appears that that's a reasonable space, and the other functions for that kind of property are highly limited, honestly. It's right on the train tracks, a lot of wetlands on that property. I can show you the drawings. So those 2 properties. So therefore, we're down to 3 properties that I'm going to share with you tonight. And so these are highly preliminary ideas and thoughts. The goal was to understand whether or not what kind of development could occur on these sites, as well as what kind of septic, roadways, water, all those kinds of core structures could be happening. I thought we'd share the progress. We are meeting, TPA is meeting on Tuesday next week with Aaron Mannix here in town to go over this. Aaron has been briefed with all these various these draft documents that have they've generated. So she's already seen these, but we're going to actually have a sit-down meeting and go over the details. So the first property that we're looking at is this is the area that is just north of it's on Durham Road, but it's just north of Brown and Ryerson. So right down here, this area here, there's Ryerson. This is Legend Hill, and then this is Brown. You can see the red is the outline. They've gone through and done the research on who owns every adjacent property that's there. The suggestion is they would come off of Lenore Lane to bring in a roadway with a cul-de-sac. We're talking about 14 units of some sort of housing structures. We're not sure the actual design, whether they're multi-story or one-story or whatever. They would put these community septics in these 1, 2, 3 spots, 4 spots here. So they've located those, and everything is within setbacks, within reasons, and those kind of things. We need to look at water source, because water is a little bit difficult in that area because of the uranium, the well water.
It's steep. Yes, it's Connecticut water, but they have wells up there. Yeah.
Yeah. So that still has to be resolved. So we're looking at that. The thinking on this is that this is probably desirable to go to senior housing, some sort of senior kind of living environment. And that these units, probably 6 or 7 would fall into some sort of senior affordable dedicated to Madison residents. So that would be the thinking on that function.
And what's driving that mix that they're recommending? Like, is there a reasoning behind it?
15% of the housing needs to be affordable for, basically for them to get the density and that kind of stuff. They have to have some level of affordable housing in.
Because of zoning. So this is
So-
like a friendly 830G.
Yes,
Okay.
exactly.
So it doesn't have to be that at the town or somehow, from a zoning standpoint.
If they chose to change that,
Yes,
that's going to be
right,
part of the
right.
conversations next week.
Right. But if there were no zoning changes, then the only way you could build this is if it were.
Correct.
Yeah,
They've
okay.
worked within existing
Right.
zoning and regulatory and
Right,
both
okay.
state.
I think that's
local
important to
zoning.
point that out, right? That they're not saying that for some reason this area is better for affordable housing or it's just
No.
more the only way you could do this is the zoning because of the zoning.
Yeah, so for example, this blue line here, this light blue line, that's the setback around the wetlands. That is adjustable by town zoning. They could make a modification to that line and where that line is. But that is the statutory location of that line. So basically they said, we're only looking at how can you fit something in here within existing rules and regulations.
And the reason they picked density is because this was like what's the max you basically. You could also just have,
This
you
area
could have
here-
like 6 houses there, or 7 houses versus 7 structures, right?
Yeah, you could you could
yeah.
do maybe 3 larger
Yeah,
houses there or
right,
something like
right,
that.
okay. This is kind of to maximize the density.
Yeah,
Right,
yeah.
okay.
And also this area here, which is of the property it's such a steep terrain that it wasn't
It wasn't developable.
developable
Okay.
in a reasonable way.
It's
So-
funny because when you look at the thing, you're like, oh my God, there's all this land up there, and then you
Right.
get into it, and that's why
Oh,
we
it's-
did this exercise, right?
I think it's 16 acres or 20 acres.
You know, if they had any conversations with Connecticut Water, since I know Connecticut Water obviously services Legend Hill, whether there was some
We
arrangement.
have not had that conversation yet. We felt the next step was sitting down with Aaron and Mayor and Madison and going through these issues and getting towns zoning and planning regulations
Right.
kind of.
Yeah, I just didn't know if
Right.
TBC
And then if that seems to make sense, then, and they think this is the right way to go, then we'll start talking.
I just wondered if TBC is in their determination of feasibility for this development had any conversation all with Connecticut Water. But
Not yet.
no. Okay.
The next property is on Ridge Road. So we own 96 acres on Ridge Road. And what they've done is they've put this development and what is suggesting here is 89 units. You could go up to 89 units in density. And they'd have these regional septic systems here. This is on Connecticut water, so this is already on existing water. You can see there's a fair amount of wetlands in different parts of this area that are avoiding, but I think they were pretty creative in laying this out. Their thinking here is that, again, to stay within the density and stay within the zoning, that you probably do, maybe 20 to 30% of this is workforce housing. And then the rest being more market rate housing. So,
So where's the stump dump on this?
dump is right here in the middle. So that would be the challenge. If this was made sense to go forward, then we'd have to find a new home for the functions that are at the stump dump. Because right now there's metal recycling, there's refrigerator and propane tank recycling. There's plastic recycling as well as the brush and leaf disposal.
Don't we
And-
already share, transfer station with Guilford?
Yeah, no, this is for
They don't take
Russian Lake,
brush.
yeah.
It's
so- Yeah.
only trash. It's-
But this used to be, from what I understood, a landfill. So I thought can you build housing on?
They're saying yes.
Oh,
So
like,
they've gone through the records, and
Oh,
they've
really?
gone through the things, yeah, so they can.
I mean, I guess your water source is not well, right? So,
Water source is Connecticut water.
yeah, so
So
you don't have that.
You don't
issue.
have that, and
Oh.
it's just, you do have plenty of roofs for septic, so.
Well, or, I mean, you could not have leave stump dump to stump dump, the other pieces, possibility. Yeah, that's interesting. So all the way back, I didn't realize off of, Ridge Road is,
This is Ridge Road right here.
right, okay, so there's a whole parcel behind, because aren't there houses right along Ridge Road leading up to the stump dump?
Yeah, down the page, yes.
So here, I'll
Okay.
zoom out, see,
We're going to approach the dump, I guess, further down toward the hill.
so
Yeah,
here where the houses are here. Right in this area here.
okay,
And then there's a couple houses here. And then obviously as you go all the way down to Green
Huh.
Hill Road, there's houses all along the way. But all this land here is all owned by the town. Everything inside the red line is owned by the town. So it's almost 100 acres.
and it is the only access then coming up through that, there's no way,
Up through
remember we
Ridge
talked
Road.
about we talked about coming in off of, what's the road, Orpus or?
It's,
I mean, that's a further conversation.
Up here.
Yeah,
Possibly, I don't know.
Yeah.
These are all privately owned properties. Not owned by the town, so there's no frontage. So this was the one concept that they're looking at, for, housing here.
What are those two squares in red?
This is the, water tower for Connecticut. I'm sorry, this is the water tower and this is the, cell tower. That's on that site. Those are two functions that are currently in place there.
Yeah. That would be a tough thing to find, I would think, but it's interesting. I mean, and
Well, if you're talking for like workforce housing
Yeah.
and things of that nature, I mean, it's, potentially, I mean, I'm thinking of on average between market rate and workforce rate, you're probably talking $450,000 to $550,000 a unit max.
Mhm.
So, these are good entry point homes for a lot of folks. That you can look at. Right? So there are 14 units on Durham Road, there are 8, 9 units here. And then the last parcel is on Cops Road, which is part of the Bauer property. The Bauer deed has in there a restriction that says we can use that affordable housing is one of the options. This is Jeffrey here, this is the high school here. This is the Bauer Farm is over here.
Yeah, that's Wilson.
Bolson, I'm sorry. What's interesting is, if you come up Cops Road, they're talking about coming up this way and preserving the hiking trails and the wetlands and all those kinds of things that are part of, that are currently in place. So you have, it's a 33 total units. They factored in here, all of which would be affordable for a workforce. I'm assuming workforce would also satisfy the deed restriction, but I'm not sure. We need to get some sort of understanding on that.
It's all like, UCI, percentage of AGI and stuff, that Aaron can talk to you about that.
Sorry.
It's percent of the income levels
AMI.
Right.
or AMI. I guess I was going to adjust it. Okay.
Yeah.
Median income.
Coverage
Yeah.
would be 60 and 80.
Yeah,
They'd
correct.
all have to be
Yeah.
at 60 and 80
Or less.
or less. Yeah. So basically, there's 33 units here. You have 9 units that are running right on the Cops Road. You have these 4, 6, 7, 11 units here and the balance in this cul-de-sac. Again, the lighter areas here are the community septics fields. And again, this is on Connecticut water. So it always serviced that one. So that's their kind of preliminary thinking on that.
That's interesting.
So as we're putting a plan together, what we're trying to do obviously is we've identified program, we're identifying buildings, and we're identifying potential development, seeing how these things mix and match and merge. So, as we're talking about this, we're talking about 120 to 135 units of housing. So, the grand list impact. I'm guessing at this stage, but I'm guessing it's going to be well north of $30 million. 30, probably 45 million, depending on the types of housing and the things that could go. So that would fund, if all of them, if any or all of them, there'd be a substantial funding opportunity to pay for several of these capital projects that we're talking. I'll throw it out for discussion. What do you think?
It's interesting, and the town definitely, we're low in our, workforce housing count.
I mean, I mean, I think this becomes a conversation of, does the town want to take the lead addressing the housing affordability? Yeah, by using town properties, does it want to take a lead in this? Anything we do, highlight again, has to be voted on by the public because this is town property and we can't just do something to it without getting public approval. But the other thing that this is aligning with, I just was on the call today with the housing bill that was passed last year. We're going to be provided, targets for housing numbers, incremental housing. And, I was saying on the call how we're fortunate because we're doing this legwork ahead of time so that when we have conversations with the state, we can say, okay, we have things that have been identified. We know where it was, rather than just being handed some numbers and we got to scramble and try to figure out how to make it work, So this is going to be an interesting conversation. The other thing is it doesn't always have to be affordable either, right? So this is part of the conversation as well. It's we heard from the residents that people want housing choice, right? More housing options. So so I think this is a policy discussion that the Board of Selectmen had. To me, gives you the list now to talk about and how do we, from a public policy standpoint, do we want to move this forward?
I think at least at this stage, these kind of preliminary concepts are in the 60 to 70 unit range for affordable / workforce kind of
Right.
units. It could be more, could be less, but that's kind of their
Yeah,
order of magnitude. Like I said, all 33 here at COPS would fall into that category. Probably 5 to 7 at Durham Road, and maybe 30 some odd to 40 that on the Ridgewood property. And the rest of them will be market based. So and again, depending on how that goes, that ultimately gravitates towards how it affects Grand Lakes and then eventual revenue side.
is there I mean, this kind of finalizes kind of their work. They've come up with some concepts. Like, is there?
No, they need to go further
There's
into
a septic.
infrastructure. They've already started looking at the septic. That's these locations. So they partnered with Mike Harkin, who does a tremendous amount of work in the town and is highly respected in both the town and the state. So he was the one who cited the septic issues. The biggest issue is the water issue on the Durham property. This is Connecticut water. They're verifying that as well, that possible. But the next biggest step is sitting down with planning and zoning and understanding how the town would view these kinds of developments and then what would be the process. So if this would end up, if these concepts seem to make some degree of sense, then these have to be kind of built out, in a little bit greater detail in order to provide the big core basis of an RFP. Because the concept of an RFP for these kind of properties to provide those folks that might be wanting to develop these things with level of certainty that their projects would get approved, because we've done all the fundamental groundwork on laying it out, how in kind of the core conceptual design. We're not designing architecturally what the buildings are, or whether they're how many bedrooms and floors and all that kind of stuff.
Well, I think before going to that, I think the first question is going to be really the Board of Selectmen. Does the Board of Selectmen want to identify a parcel, to develop? Because it's going to have to go through this public approval process. And, as we've heard, there are some people in town that don't want us to sell any town property or develop any town property. So this is going to be a big public conversation. I'm just wondering, before we go to the next, this is kind of pre-feasibility, right? Because we're not going in and doing a lot of testing.
I kind of look at this as tying all these pieces together, because
Yeah.
the master plan is dealing with all these pieces as you're talking about. So, we have
Yeah.
1,200 acres plus of land in the town of Madison. Does any of that influence how we deal with some of the other buildings and the other properties?
I'm just thinking in terms of though, do we stop at this concept level now with properties? Like we've gotten to a certain point, we understand generally what real developable opportunities there are. We understand generally, conceptually, how many units could be possibly on these. The next step is, would be, I would only want to do that if we had support that like, yeah, let's go look at the Cops Road piece or the Ridge Road piece. We think that's the best first in line if we're going to do this.
Yeah, I think we just have to get past this next regulatory step, the rules and regulations step with Aaron. Once we get past that, then I think we're at a stopping point.
Yeah,
And then
okay.
we can decide. So I think that, at this stage, I was, is this interesting enough for us to take that
Yeah,
next step?
right.
It's really a core question, because I think we.
Well, I guess I would advocate going to the commission about it, because there's nothing that the town is proposing, so. This is talking to her about the regulatory hurdles that we would have to go through to make one.
And she may look at this and come up with better ideas
Yeah,
on how it could be developed and other kind of concepts. So, those are not, there's no cornerstone on good ideas. So, that's why we're trying to think about it, but we do believe that all three of these properties have potential.
mhm,
And they can really not only add to financial potential, but more importantly, lifestyle potential in the town of Madison. Creates diversity in our housing base and addresses a strong need for both
Step-down housing.
different types of housing for both younger people and older people in this town. That's a huge issue for a lot of people. I know my wife gets, as a realtor in town, gets probably 2 or 3 calls a month for people wanting to get into single level housing in Madison, and there's just nothing available. And that is even if that's affordable. It's really tough. So, as well as there's a lot of first time home buyers that are just closed on the market. They go to other towns. It's just not an option here in Madison. So, trying to go after that kind of, I strongly believe if we don't start thinking about this kind of things, we're gonna run into real troubles with volunteer firemen, policemen that live in town, teachers that live in town, other folks that are working in various community service type functions and people that volunteer in this town. And we made that statement early on in this committee's structure, that we really felt that was an important objective here to try to encourage that those type of folks to be in Madison.
well, I don't think as I said, I think the committee's job, once you have that conversation with Aaron, is to recommend these are the top 3 sites. Here's best use for the top 3 sites that we can, based on the analysis, and then it becomes a policy discussion, I think.
There is one other site that we haven't looked at yet, which is here at the Town Campus Learning Center. It's difficult with all the buildings there and everything on at the moment, with those portables there. That was
Yeah.
part of their scope to look at that site as well. Because we weren't sure if some other town function should be located there or what should happen with that site. So that's another question.
And of course, the other site that you and I have discussed, and I think we've discussed too, is the idea of maybe doing affordable housing above the train station parking lot. And the possibility of adaptively reusing some of that airspace. And I know coincidentally, I had seen Senator Cohen actually on the train into New York last month, and we got to talking about this possibility. And she was saying that right now they're working to do just that with the train station in Branford to actually encourage developers, and she said there are a number of them already reached out to her, interested in building above the parking lot and having covered parking effectively on the ground level and building the units above it. With transit-oriented development, which is a hot topic today. So
it also entitles towns to grant money.
it does, and that's one of the things I know that David Corus had talked about was TOD and trying to do some transit-oriented stuff where folks can take the train to work and whatever. So she was saying that they're already underway doing exploring that. Branford, and certainly I'm sure you'll be hearing from her, Peggy, about how that might in fact work here as well as another opportunity.
Yeah, that is not part of TPA's scope of work. Let me just
Right.
be very clear on that, because we do not own that property. The property is owned by the state.
State property.
So that would have to, I mean, we would be involved on that, but it's a totally different process that's what I'm working.
If it's still within.
I do need to, the next item, I'd like to get well, I want to take a vote on the expression of interest on the account. We wrote the memo. Did you read that memo? Did not. No. Sure, bring it up. If I can move on to that, because I lose him with it, I'd like to. The Board of Selectmen asked us to take a position on the proposals for Academy School for proposals. So we at our last meeting, we defined a subgroup, was John, Vance, and myself, to go over all 4 proposals and put together a perspective that this committee would move forward with. In general, if I can summarize it, I'll bring up the document here.
Together with your scoring grid that you developed, right, David?
Yes, yeah, we did some scoring on it on a bunch of criteria. So we generated this document on the 21st. Kind of summarized document. I did attach it to the memo, the agenda and everything that went out last week. We evaluated based on a criteria based on these 5 criteria: impact upon the character and building and scale of the historic area. We looked at the density impact on the area, the sensitivity to history and the architecture in the area, compatibility with other town plans. Obviously, we're thinking through items for the chapel and Memorial Hall and other things, and then what we had on our assessment of proposal feasibility. We did, one of the things we did was we did a research on the town green, and what was interesting, and by going through the archives and going through materials, basically for 250 almost plus years, there's been a consistent action of private citizens that have purchased properties that were either commercial or residential and then given them to the town for town functions. So Daniel Hand did that by buying the properties and building the school in the mid 1800s. The Meggs family bought the general store that was on the site of where where Memorial Hall was, moved it downtown and then raised the money to build Memorial Hall. Their houses that were on the green, that were the Sabbath Day houses, were all moved or removed, as well as other houses that were along Academy Street. So
Maybe to cut you off again, I apologize. I knew this was not going to be a half-hour meeting, but I didn't think it was going to be 2.
Plus, so I apologize, but I need to leave.
Of course.
So, basically, we came down and we evaluated all of them. We felt that the historical perspective was, in general, removing housing from that area. So we tended to, the housing, proposals, for large amounts of housing got downgraded. So the two proposals, one for affordable housing and one for, market rate housing, felt were not consistent with the historical perspective. We felt that the hotel proposal as well as refined living's proposal were the better of the two proposals. They scored very tightly to one another. We were concerned about the hotel though, because we felt that the density and the scale and layout would really in order to be able to deal with some of the other things we're talking about, you have to put the playing fields into play as part of the development, that you couldn't isolate those away from the development if that was chosen. So we came down to recommending that the Board of Selectmen consider the refined living and Stowe proposal going forward. Then the Stowe proposal within the caveat that those playing fields had to be, some sort of consideration had to be given to how to develop them. So that was the thing. So I wanted to take I put a motion on the table that we approve this letter as written and forward it to the Board of Selectmen. So do you second it? Okay, thank you. I'll open it up for discussion.
So I read the memo, I thought it was pretty good, and I also used that as an opportunity to go back and rewatch presentation. They both happen to be on the same night of this, the Stowe and what's the one called?
Refined living.
Refined living, plans, and I'm in total agreement with the summation of the memo, because I mean, I like the idea of a hotel. We could use another hotel in Connecticut, arguably. However, that particular, in order to make it work, the hotel proposers were very clear in saying they needed to add that whole extra building. There's questions about whether that area will bear septic for all of that. You know, I was hearing that they were very confident they were going to be getting between $500 and $2,300 per night per room. Thought a lot of our family can't afford to stay there. And so, you know, thinking about having family come to town to visit, they're not staying there mostly. It's a great idea, great concept. I loved the design of the, you know, the conceptual design of the hotel. It looks beautiful, but I just think that the other proposal is more realistic, more poses more use to members of the town, and just made a lot more sense.
That
So
was
I
the reason why in the memo we put that we didn't felt that the hotel was realistic unless the playing fields came into play to give you the amount of space to manage the density.
Well, I think we also weighed against that, though, how the expanded hotel potentially could disrupt the character and scale of the adjoining properties, and I think that was a consideration as well.
I mean, there's no doubt when you drive by, you know, that centerpiece of the whole green area is the church with the beautiful columns, whatever. There's other stuff closer, but still, like, you notice that church up on the hill, and it's, you know, it's beautiful. It's, you know, pastoral, whatever. And so I do agree that having to build too much, like almost double the size of what's at Academy could take away from that.
Any other comments or discussion?
What was our final kind of scroll to the bottom? Did we include in there the for the board the scoring the rating that we did or not?
The actual scoring, we just came to the conclusion.
Yeah, no. Okay.
The actual scoring, I mean, basically, he basically scored those 5 points on a 1 to 3 point scale. One being very bad, being very good. I believe those two came in at 9 and 10 and respectively, and then the other two came in around 5 or 6. So there was a large discrepancy between 2 at the bottom, 2 at the top. And the hotel had complemented a lot of the other things that we wanted to do on the green. But at the same token, it took away from parking and away from things we wanted to do. And we were just concerned about the feasibility and the scale. The refined living also complemented nicely with the restaurant concepts and open space concepts and the market concepts to doing on the green. And it didn't have additional footprint, which gave us the parking and those other kind of functions.
And if we have certain proposals in town that include some workforce housing,
Right.
that helps the town to get closer to the goal the state needs us to be at.
And part of the idea with workforce housing, because these were studio apartments that were proposed, that they probably were not going to be family. One part of the concern with the other housing proposals is that the families would be using the green because where do they have open space? You know, where would they go for to play and other things? So all of a sudden, you know, you could run into conflicts with all the other normal programming and the way town's members use that space. So we had some concerns about how that complements the area. And we didn't feel that workforce housing that were studio apartments would have that same intensity. So although it got discounted for that workforce housing because the intensity, it didn't get discounted as much as the other ones.
David, would be your intention when, and Peggy, the board, are you intending then to appear before the board and make this, or is this simply going to be?
We were available, but I know Peggy's asked for all the various
Yeah,
town
so,
committees to submit their thoughts in writing, which is what we're doing.
right, so there was a, request on Monday night's agenda, the board of selectmen is just, and requested feedback from town staff, like the health department's gonna just talk about some of the issues with septic, zoning, what zoning would be required, all that. And then we asked city committees if they wanted to submit recommendations or opinions. We received something from the EDC, I think, a few weeks ago, and so this would be submitted. I'll abstain from any voting for this today. This was done by the committee. So I think it's just helpful to get feedback, and I think it's important. You know, one of the things that you mentioned in here, because I saw the earlier draft, I don't know if it's changed, is, you know, this idea that it's going to impact everything along there, any of these proposals, right? So what is our vision for
Exactly.
the block, the super block kind of concept? So, so I think it's important for us to have a conversation about that, because once again, we're doing these things without a plan, right? Like a bigger plan. And so, I think this will be helpful for the board to read. And we'll be receiving all that feedback Monday night. And then we have to pick a path, you know, so not easy. But I think there's a lot of questions that came out of the proposals. So that's where they thought, well, let's drill down with some of these questions.
There was one of the questions that was requested was, what are your thoughts on the expressions of interest, but also if you didn't do any of the expressions of interest, what would you do? And we came up with our thinking is that probably tried to preserve the original historical part of Academy, which is basically in 1936, there was about an addition that was about 60 or 65% of the space that was added. So if you think of where the doors that go in, that would be the cutoff there, so that could be used for some sort of outsourced restaurants. It could be used for town offices. It could be used for probate. We certainly felt there would be a real need to put in restrooms for the town green because there's just no public congregating space for those kind of functions. And then this area that would be demoed would either be an outdoor amphitheater that would complement Memorial Hall if it was approved, or it'd be green space. So that was our alternate. Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think it helps give a perspective and, I don't think anybody wants to put a huge stake in the ground at this point, right? So,
So all in favor of moving this forward to submitting it to the Board of Selectmen? Aye. Opposed? No. Okay, thank you.
I'm an extension, so.
The last item in the agenda is, last month we had, in a couple months, we've had conversations of public outreach. So I've started the process of contacting different groups, in town. Let's see. So these are the folks that we've contacted Rotary. I'm waiting for potential dates from them. The Exchange Club would like us to join them on March 4th. With an overview briefing. It's basically 15-20 minutes of what work we're doing and take questions and lay out some of these concepts that are at only feasibility. Very clear, nothing's been proposed or nothing's been approved. But in order to start getting communities and stakeholders input in terms of their perspective. Contacted JCs, contacted the Chamber, contacted Men Over 60, Women's Club, Republican Town Committee, Democratic Town Committee. So those are the ones that we've reached out to, and our thought was over the next month or two to be able to try to connect with each of these folks to get the word out of what this committee is doing.
So I think we were gonna do something at the senior center, right? And.
Yeah, so
Chamber?
I know you and I
Yeah.
talked about this, that we
Yeah.
were gonna do some sort of a town open
Yeah,
meeting
right.
at the senior center after we do some of these
Yeah.
individual meetings.
I think I
And
would
try
do some
to tie it
dates,
together
right?
with the Surf Club master plan
Yeah.
and have kind of a combined piece. So as well. So I want that's going on. I'm working on a presentation that we can use with Madison Stout, biggest PR person, call her.
I don't think, yeah.
At least, kind of a designer, so give it another set of fresh eyes on our work to say how it would be helpful to present this. So I have a proposal. I'm not going to go through it. It's 20 some odd slides. We've gone through everything by discussion today. So it's basically very simple. What's our charge? What have we done so far? Where are some of the opportunities and options that are out there? And what do you think? That's basically the presentation that we're talking about. So I wanted to share that with everyone. And basically, we're going to have, my objective is to have at least 2 members of the committee at each of these presentations. And have, public members probably be the ones that do it. Okay. Any comments or questions?
I want to thank the subcommittee that did the work on that memo. It's good work. Thank you.
Okay, with that, I'll open it up for public comments. We have one person here.
Hi. All right. Robert Letskis, 32 Hathaway Lane, and a owner and operator of Refine Living. And I just want to thank the board, the committee rather, for selecting our proposal to present to the board of selectmen. I think it was means a lot to me. Put a lot of effort in. Willing to do the work that it takes to not only do something that's feasible and economically vibrant for the community, but also something that's gonna actually get in front of the residents, that they're gonna actually get a hold of guests. I have experience in getting in front of residents before and getting unanimous votes, so here to do whatever we're gonna do. I'll sit with this committee. I just let the see before this, and I'm here. And I appreciate it, my heart.
Thank you. Yeah, more.
Okay. All right. Well, with that, any other comments? Thank you all for a very long meeting tonight. I know we had a lot to go through, but I appreciate everybody's attention, and Bob, I hope we haven't overwhelmed you. I hope you'll show up next time after that.
I was happy that I got to talk to you on Friday. Yeah, it was wonderful. So, yeah.
All right, so I entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Well,